Welcome to the Galien Foundation Week of Innovation webinars here in New York. My name is Dr. Theodore F. I am the CEO of Skipta Informa Pharma Intelligence and have the pleasure of serving as the moderator for this Galien Foundation session today. Objective this week is to provide additional content and background for our largest annual event, the Galien USA Awards, to be held this Thursday here in New York in conjunction with our annual Galien Forum of Speakers representing top scientific experts and leaders in global health. Because the mission of Galien is innovation to improve the human condition, we have developed this new webinar series to give our nominees for Best Pharmaceutical, Best Biotech, and Best MedTech product greater visibility in describing their journey of medical discovery. This year's Galien USA Awards has a record 67 nominees for our three categories, from 54 companies covering 13 diverse therapeutic areas, ranging from cancer, cardiology, and neurosciences to infectious and very rare genetic diseases. We will be looking closely at the products in all these critical areas throughout the week. Now, details of today's webinar. Because of the number of nominees and the range of conditions represented by all this excellent science, the Galien USA Awards Committee has decided to host a series of 10 webinars prior to Thursday's forum and awards ceremony, where the winners in each of the three best of categories will be announced. The 10 webinars will drill down on the different therapeutic focus of the products, the quality of the science behind them, and most important, the patient clinical impact. It's intended to give our award attendees, the media, and the public a fuller picture of the innovation behind the medicine. In the best pharmaceutical category, which is our focus today, we will be holding 4 webinars due to the large number, 23 in total, of products representing this important field. Members of the award committee decided to arrange each of the 4 webinars to center on specific therapeutic drug segments. These include chronic diseases, solid tumor cancers, hematologic cancers, and other rare diseases, and infectious diseases and reproductive health. This webinar and the hour we have allotted is devoted to the 8 nominees in solid tumor cancers. What we cover today relates to this central question: what are the prospects and limitations behind the new approach to cancer treatment for increased knowledge of the underlying biology behind malignant tumor growth and proliferation? Immunotherapy and precision medicine represent the vanguard in treatment, emerging as a complement to the traditional chemotherapy, radiology, and hormone replacement toolkit. Likewise, adoption of targeted biomarkers as a diagnostic aid will accelerate the pace of tumor-agnostic drugs, the earliest of which are among our nominees for this year's best pharmaceutical product. That leads us to an additional question to review. To realize the potential of these new drugs, many additional innovations in care delivery are required, including introduction of AI and big data for automated point-of-care decision support in real time, acceptance of the virtual tumor board concept, and prior authorization linked to an accepted mode of value-based contracting. Is our health system up to the task? This webinar does include time for audience questions. Questions can be forwarded to me, the moderator, using the link provided on your screen. And with that said, let's move right into our discussion. I'll start by introducing the nominees participating scientific clinical representatives who are joining me for this webcast. So first off, welcome to everybody. Congratulations on your company's nomination, and thank you for your time today. Joining me today, first off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mimi Huizinga, Vice President, Head of Oncology Medical for Novartis. Welcome, Dr. Huizinga. Next, Dr. Mark Fellis, Global Medical Affairs Head, Track Franchise, Bayer. Welcome, Dr. Fellis. Next, Dr. Sam Spiegelman, Senior Global Medical Affairs Leader, Janssen Research and Development, LLC. Welcome, Dr. Spiegelman. Next, Dr. Sabine Brookman-Mai, Executive Medical Director, Clinical Lead for Janssen Research and Development, LLC. Welcome, Dr. Brookman-Mai. Dr. Ted Johnson, Research Product Lead, Pfizer Incorporated. Welcome, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Jorge Ortiz, Executive Director, Global Medical Affairs Oncology, Nubeqa at Bayer. Welcome, Dr. Ortiz. And finally, Dr. Ute Seaman, Global Head Medical Affairs for Advanced Accelerator Application, Lutera. And welcome, Dr. Seaman. So to all of our panelists, thank you again so much for your time. I'm excited for our discussion today. A note to our audience that there is an accessible link to a 100-word statement submitted by these companies on each of the 8 nominated products. This link is available for viewing during this webcast. Also, there is a poll added to this session, and we ask that you please complete this. We will announce the results to our poll following our discussion today. In our session today, I will ask all of our company representatives to each briefly address my questions. But before that, I'll give everybody just a moment to participate in the poll that popped up on the screen. We'll give a few seconds here, and thank you again for submitting that. Okay, very good. So again, our session today, we have 3 sets of questions that we will ask each of our panelists to answer. Each of our panelists will take at least one of the questions to answer. So if I can start on question number 1, Dr. Spiegelman, again, welcome. Thank you very much for your time, sir. And our question number 1 that we'd like to get your response to is as follows. Why did your company choose to focus on the disease state, an indication associated with the product? And in what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need? Dr. Spiegelman, thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I appreciate it. First of all, at Janssen, we are in our therapeutic area of oncology, absolutely devoted to the elimination of cancer. We're inspired by today's progress, emerging new ideas, and frankly, we're driven by the enormous global unmet need in cancer. Now, bladder cancer is a very common malignancy that results in approximately 200,000 deaths per year worldwide. And a significant number of these patients present to the doctor with metastatic disease. The prognosis is very poor for metastatic prostatic cancer, with a 5-year survival of only 5% and limited treatment options. Now, over the last 35 years, there's been limited progress in the treatment of metastatic bladder cancer. Newly available therapies provide clinical benefit that is a small improvement over traditional chemo. Balversa is approved for the treatment of patients with metastatic urothelial cancer whose tumors are characterized by fibroblast growth factor receptor, or FGFR, genetic alterations, which are identified through a companion diagnostic test. About 1 in 5 patients with urothelial cancer that is metastatic have an FGFR genetic alteration. And in the US alone, it's estimated that up to approximately 3,000 patients with urothelial carcinoma will test FGFR positive on an annual basis. It's thought that patients with this unique genetic alteration have a particularly aggressive form of bladder cancer, and unfortunately much less likely to respond to existing treatment options. At Janssen, we've also begun clinical trials in the use of Balversa in the patient who actually presents with a lower stage of bladder cancer known as non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. In fact, 75% of all newly diagnosed patients with bladder cancer present with non-muscle invasive bladder cancer. Of those patients with non-muscle invasive bladder cancer, 40 to 50% of them will have FGFR alterations, making them good or excellent candidates for Balversa use. Personalized, genetically targeted medical care opens an entire new area in oncology treatment. I'm very happy on a personal and a professional basis that Balversa addresses this important patient unmet need. So thank you very much.
Great. Dr. Spiegel, thank you very much for that response. I'd like to stay on the first question, and Dr. Ortiz, if I could pass to you next. And again, I'll just repeat the question for yours and the audience's benefit. Dr. Ortiz, why did your company choose to focus on the disease state and indication associated with the product? In what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need? Dr. Ortiz, if I could pass to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you to the Galien Foundation for the invitation. Feel very honored to be representing Nubeqa with this group of very talented individuals. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good question. Prostate cancer is the second most diagnosed malignancy in men worldwide, and is the 5th leading cause of death from cancer in men. And those men that have been treated with either radical prostatectomy or radiotherapy and are progressing, but still without evidence of metastasis, are still largely able to lead active lives, are largely asymptomatic from their cancer. So for these men, there remained a high unmet need for a treatment that would extend their lives, delay metastases, but also having a manageable safety profile that allows them to continue to lead otherwise normal lives, right? So Nubeqa is a potent androgen receptor antagonist with high affinity for the androgen receptor that was designed to be structurally distinct in its class. Its chemical structure has attributes like greater polarity and flexibility, which have been associated with low blood-brain barrier penetration in animal and human healthy human studies. These low blood-brain barrier penetration may lead to a lower risk of central nervous AEs, adverse events, which would have negative impact in the patient's ability to lead otherwise active lives. And today we now know from the RMS study that in Nubeqa, the incidence of central nervous related adverse events such as fatigue, falls, cognitive impairments, seizures, as well as other adverse events of interest like rash, fractures, and hypertension were low. Additionally, it is important to know that most patients with non-metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancers have other comorbidities that require them to take multiple medications in addition to their cancer therapy. And those medications have the potential to interact with newly added therapies. Now with Nubeqa is unique because it has a low potential to impact those medications commonly required to manage those comorbidities. So this means that there's a reduced need to monitor, modify, or dose adjust those medications. So to wrap it up today, with the information we have, it is critical to treatment with non-metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer with an androgen receptor inhibitor that not only extends life, but have the potential to minimize the long-term impact of treatment.
Very good. Dr. Ortiz, thank you very much for your statement and response. And that was great. If I could continue on with the first question, Dr. Seaman, if I could ask you the same question, again, I'll repeat it for your benefit and for the audience. Why did your company choose to focus on the disease state and indication associated with the product? In what ways did the product represent a therapeutic breakthrough, and how significant was the level of unmet medical need? Dr. Seaman, welcome and thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. I think I only can echo some of this, what has been said by my colleagues already. I think oncology is still a field with a huge unmet need and with still very poor outcomes for patients and a bad quality of life sometimes. So with Lutathera, and just to let you know, AAA is a Novartis company. So Mimi is one of my colleagues. It's very different to have radioligand therapy. It opens up a completely new field And with the greater knowledge on tumor biology and with more identification of cell surface receptors, we can really unlock the potential for more precision approaches within oncology and cancer. So RT is differently because it focuses on a molecular basis with a molecular therapy, and really targets the cancer cells in the body, and then unleashes the power of its own acid to say, and irradiates the cancer cells with radiation. RT needs an anchor point, which is specific to cell surface cancer cells. And it's not common in normal tissue because you don't want to have dye the normal tissue. With Lutathera, we have a peptide receptor radionuclide therapy, and it's a systemic administration. Right now, Lutathera is approved for GEP-NET, so gastroenteropancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. It's really a very long term. And for positive hormone receptor somatostatin, sorry for this, and it's in foregut, midgut, and hindgut. But AAA is on its way to unlock the potential of more indications and even with combinations. So with this, I hand over.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seaman. That was a great response. Thank you so much. Dr. Johnson, if I could go to you next, I'd like to start a new discussion topic. Dr. Johnson, the question is for you as follows. Is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with this product? What's been the clinical response to the product thus far? Dr. Johnson, if you want to remind everybody of your product and your background first, that would be great. And I will pass to you. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation to speak. I'm happy to be a part of this webinar. And the product that I'm going to be discussing is Lorbrena, which is an ALK inhibitor for non-small cell lung cancer. And I'm a research project lead at Pfizer in oncology. I'm a research fellow. So the first thing I want to say in response to this question is lung cancer is not just a smoker's disease. I think there's a stigma associated with lung cancer. So the product Lorbrena, it targets ALK mutations in non-small cell lung cancer. Many of these patients that are treated with Lorbrena are diagnosed at stage 4. The reason is they have no risk factors. So they're usually middle-aged. And for instance, they don't smoke. Almost all of those that have ALK mutations are non-smokers or never smokers. So that's the first point. So recently, results from this CROWN study that were presented at the European Society for Medical Oncology virtual Congress in 2020, Lorbrena treatment resulted in a statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvement in PFS, progression-free survival, compared with crizotinib. And crizotinib is Pfizer's first-generation ALK inhibitor. It's actually the first inhibitor approved for ALK therapy in 2011. So in addition, Lorbrena improved intracranial outcomes for patients with or without baseline brain metastases. Importantly, the risk of CNS progression was reduced by over 90%, and a majority of patients had complete intracranial response with Lorbrena, which has not been seen with other approved therapies in this setting. And these data are really consistent with the high brain penetration that was designed into the molecule, and also the coverage over the IC50 for all of these ALK mutants.
Good. Dr. Johnson, thank you very much for your statement and response. We appreciate it. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Brookman-Mai. And Dr. Brookman-Mai, we'll stay with the same question for you. As a reminder for you and for the audience, the question is as follows. There is a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with this product. What's been the clinical response to the product thus far? And Dr. Brookman-Mai, again, if you would just remind the audience your product and your background prior to answering the question. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So I will talk about Erleada. Erleada is a selective non-steroidal androgen receptor antagonist approved in 2 clinical indications, and I will talk a little bit more about that when going into this question. I am working for Janssen as the clinical lead for the development of Erleada. So with regard to the measurable impact with the clinical outcomes, I can indeed confirm that there is indeed a measurable impact. And this was also confirmed by clinicians, and also the feedback we received was very positive. But let me give you a little bit more background also to the disease indication. At Janssen overall, for the treatment of prostate cancer, we are trying to treat prostate cancer patients across the entire disease continuum and also to move into earlier lines of therapy. The first indication for Erleada was non-metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer, so-called NMCRPC. And Erleada was also the first drug approved in this setting to treat patients. What you need to know is that when patients enter this disease stage, prostate cancer does no longer respond to standard hormonal treatment. And when we initiated our registrational trial, the phase 3 Spartan study, physicians were also aware that the development of CRPC, even without any distant metastasis, means that patients have entered a disease stage that is no longer curable anymore. And while clinicians knew at that time that these patients need to be treated, and also that there is a high unmet need, especially at patients at high risk for developing metastasis in a short time frame, these patients were simply not treated due to the fact that there was no approved and effective treatment available, showing an improvement in the clinical outcomes of the patients. What we also realized when we initiated our phase 3 study was when we screened the patients, about 70% of the patients had already developed distant metastasis. So this underlined again that these patients needed an early treatment, and even earlier than we had previously expected. And finally, when we look at the results of our study, of the Spartan study, then we could show that an early treatment with Erleada in this setting demonstrated a significant benefit with regard to the delay in the onset of distant metastasis. It improved overall survival. There were several patient-relevant outcomes improved. For example, the delay in the initiation of systemic chemotherapy for the treatment of more advanced disease. There was a delay in the onset of skeletal-related events, such as, for example, fractures due to bone metastasis, and this overall underlined a clear clinical benefit by the treatment of Erleada. And it also provided finally an opportunity for patients to get treated in a disease setting where a treatment was not available before. And for us, it provided also an opportunity to treat at an early stage and still also improve the long-term oncological outcomes for these patients. And finally, today, Erleada is not only approved in NMCRPC, it is also approved now in metastatic hormone-sensitive prostate cancer, which means in a disease stage where the tumor still responds to standard hormonal treatment, but has already spread to other parts of the body as well.
Dr. Brookman-Mai, thank you very much for your response. Very well done. Thank you. If I could stay on question number 2 for a moment also, Dr. Fellis, if I could welcome you to the camera here. As a reminder in question 2, is there a measurable impact you can cite on clinical outcomes for patients with this product? What's been the clinical response to the product thus far? And Dr. Fellis, again, if you could just remind everyone again of your product and your background. Thank you and welcome.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak at this webinar. Just to remind the audience, what is Pi3, the product I'm in charge as the Global Medical Affairs Head on TRK franchise within Bayer. Pi3 is the first in-class TRK inhibitor approved in the US in November 2018 for the treatment of adults and pediatric patients with a solid tumor harboring a specific genomic alteration called NTRK gene fusion. And in the clinical trials that we've run, we did have adults and pediatric patients with various tumor types, and we did observe response rate of approximately 75%. And this is already great for this heavily pretreated population following several lines of therapy. But what is also striking with the results of the clinical trials is that the duration of response lasts for a long time. We haven't reached the median duration of responses or of response in this patient population. However, in a recent updated analysis with more patients, with 175 patients, we did reach the median progression-free survival, and this one was almost 3 years, which is, again, in this patient population of locally advanced and metastatic solid tumor on patients. This is really amazing for the patients, actually, and this is really due to the selection of the population based on the genomic alteration detected through new technologies, not so new anymore, but through next generation sequencing. And with that, it leads also to probably a safety that is acceptable and a favorable safety profile. At least it's what we saw in our clinical studies. Really a manageable safety profile and really no drug discontinuation due to adverse event for most of the patients. We saw that vary in 1 or 2 patients with a tract fusion cancer. So having said that, I mean, it gives you an overview on the results, but it doesn't tell you in which tumor type, because this drug is a tumor agnostic drug, as you said that in your introduction. But basically, we saw those kind of responses across different tumor types, across adults and pediatric population. And just to provide you an example of one case, or maybe 2, we did have one case in the clinical trials, a 2-year-old female who did have an infantile fibrosarcoma, which is a really rare tumor. And this patient did have chemotherapy, several cycles, but did progress. And the next option was a leg amputation, actually. The patient was identified as having an NTRK gene fusion and was treated with larotrectinib. And after a few cycles, there was a tumor reduction that allowed a surgery. And this, the resected piece of this surgery showed that it was a pathological complete response. So basically, with larotrectinib, in some patients, you could really reach a great benefit for the patient, and potentially it could be a curative treatment, but we'll have to see in the future and follow up the patients, of course. We did have other patients in that case, and we did have some adult patients with lung cancer, with brain metastasis, and those patients, at least one, 76-year-old female, did have larotrectinib and did have a partial response with an intracranial complete response or near complete response, to be honest. This shows, among other patient cases, that this drug is really effective and with a favorable safety profile compared to the current treatment, even if there is no head-to-head comparison. When you select the population correctly, again, based on the genomic alteration called NTRK gene fusion. And because of that, it was approved as a tumor agnostic drug. And I believe that it's really a breakthrough, because it's a true precision medicine in oncology with a really a high efficacy, a favorable safety profile, and a patient selected specifically to benefit from the drug, actually.
Great.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fellis. And if okay with you, sir, I'd like to keep you on camera and ask you one more question, if you don't mind, and I'll move to our question 3. Thank you. So one more question to you. It is as follows. What challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to human trials and ultimately to a market authorization? Any lessons from your experience that might add to a better public understanding or awareness of the medicine innovation process? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Actually, we face many challenges on this tumor agnostic drug, especially regulatory ones. This is partly due to the broad tissue agnostic indication that was requested, and the fact that we conducted and submitted in our dossier only pooled data from single arm trials. However, in the US, we did discuss early on with the FDA on the dossier, and this was really helpful to make an earlier submission and getting an earlier approval. So this was really I would say, the early dialogue with the FDA was really critical in that way to to be able to explain what is our product, how it works, and how to develop it to make sure that the patient could benefit at the end. And this was really the key critical factor, I would say. But on top of that, we really need to provide a better understanding on precision medicine in oncology through the current and new technologies, such as I said, the next generation sequencing. And maybe, I mean, it's a generic term. There are many assays under this term. But these really contribute to understand better what drives the tumor in a patient and make it more and more possible to personalize the treatment actually based on a genomic alteration. In that case, it was NTRK gene fusion, but it could be in the future many others. So I hope that Vitrakvi will be the first of its kind, but only the first, and there will be many others in the future for the patients.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Fellows. I appreciate both responses to the questions. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Huizinga to the camera as well too. And I will just repeat for Dr. Huizinga's sake and the audience sake, question number 3 that we'd love to get her response on. The question is as follows: what challenges did your company confront in transitioning from early proof of concept to human trials and ultimately to a market authorization? Any lessons from your experience that might add to a better public understanding, awareness of the medicine innovation process? Dr. Huizinga, welcome. And if you could remind everybody of your product and background. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, thank you. And thank you again for inviting me. My name is Mimi Huizinga. I lead U.S. Oncology Medical for Novartis. So I have responsibility for medical affairs and for clinical development in the U.S. And I'm really excited today to talk about alpelisib, also known as Pi3. It took almost 2 years of research before alpelisib was FDA approved and available for patients in need. The Pi3 kinase pathway is stimulated by a number of oncogenes and growth factors, and elevated Pi3 kinase signaling is seen in a number of different types of cancers. By 2006, Novartis researchers had discovered 2 compounds that inhibited the class 1 Pi3 kinase isoforms and had another in the works. We looked at all 3 compounds in patients, and it revealed that they really acted too broadly and they caused a lot of unacceptable side effects. So we went back to the drawing board, researching compounds that inhibited the Pi3 kinase pathway. We uncovered a cancer-related gene mutation in the PIK3CA area. This gene contains instructions for building the Pi3 kinase alpha. So that's one of the 4 subforms in the overall Pi3 kinase protein. The mutation really flips on the protein machinery in the cell, and it drives cancer by giving cells a steady influx of fuel. It's like giving them a green light and an accelerator to step on. The PIK3CA is the most common mutated gene in advanced HR-positive, HER2-negative breast cancer, and is associated with tumor growth, with resistance to endocrine treatment, and with a worse prognosis. And in fact, we found that it was present in 40% of advanced HR-positive, HER2-negative breast cancers. So in response to this new information, we started a new hunt, this time looking for a compound that would predominantly inhibit the PIK3 kinase alpha. The Pi3 kinase alpha. So we launched a drug discovery project, and we identified looking for this alpha isoform selective compound. We synthesized and studied around 600 compounds that inhibited the Pi3 kinase alpha before honing in on Pi3. Pi3 inhibits the alpha isoform 50 times more potently than the other class 1 Pi3K isoform. So it's really very highly specific to this alpha isoform. Pi3 was tested against the Cancer Cell Line Encyclopedia. So that's a collection of more than 1,000 patient-derived cancer cell lines that have been genetically sequenced and categorized by Novartis and the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. So this was part of our joint research program that we worked on this together. The data analysis revealed that the PIK3CA mutation was a positive predictor of Pi3 sensitivity. So that led the development of this targeted therapy. So after this nearly 2 decades of work, Pi3 became the first new drug application approved under the FDA Oncology Center of Excellence Real-Time Oncology Program, Review Pilot Program. And it's for the treatment of postmenopausal women and men with hormone receptor positive HER2 negative, PIK3CA mutated, advanced or metastatic breast cancer, and it's detected by an FDA-approved test. Pic-Ray in combination with fulvestrant nearly doubled the overall or the progression-free survival for patients who received fulvestrant alone. So that was 11 months versus 5.7 respectively. I do want to note that there are potential side effects associated with Pic-Ray. It can cause a severe rash or cause hyperglycemia, among other problems. And it's always important that patients and caregivers speak with their doctors about the benefit risk profile to see if any cancer medication is right for them. We're remain excited about Pic-Ray and exploring the future potential, given the role of the Pi3 kinase pathway in a variety of tumor types. We're continuing to explore alpelisib or Pic-Ray and breast cancer and in other tumor types, and excited about what the future brings for patients.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huizinga. And to all of our panelists, thank you so much for your responses to my questions. Great responses, really exciting to see the innovation taking place really in science and in the healthcare field. So thank you all for your time and for responding. And on that, I'd like to continue on with innovation. I'd love to get your input on, two quick final questions. I'd like to go to each panelist to get your insight on, innovation specifically trending in your individual product area and what we might be able to expect next. So Dr. Huizinga, since we still have you on video, if I may start with you, my question is as follows. As scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to answer this briefly, but I will do the best I can. I think that a couple of the other panelists had mentioned this as well. The thing I'm most excited about is that we think about combination therapy. So having the greatest amount of response as early as possible in the patient's experience with cancer is really important to try to tamp down the disease and prevent some of the resistance mechanisms. We think about trying to go after the cancer cells with a multi-format approach so that we can think about and head off any of the potential resistance that might develop. So at Novartis, we work with 4 different platforms that we're quite excited about. We have targeted therapy, which is our heritage. We have a robust immuno-oncology program, and I think there's a lot of excitement happening there with the future. We're going well beyond the traditional checkpoint inhibitors that have been so beneficial to patients. Dr. Simone mentioned the radioligand therapy, which we think is an important platform, as well as cell and gene or CAR T therapy. And so I think when we look across these 4, we see combinations both across the platforms and within platforms as being a really important aspect of where we're going in the future. So what will be interesting in the prelim wards in the future is it as much about talking at the advances of one particular molecule or the advances that we can make by combining molecules and still having and ensuring that patients have a good quality of life while they're undergoing their treatment.
Great. Dr. Huizinga, thank you so much. Very exciting. And again, we appreciate your time greatly today and all of your responses. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I may ask, Dr. Fellis, if we can go to you for the final question as well, and I'll just repeat it one more time. As scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? And what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Dr. Fellis, welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. It's probably more challenging as I have a tumor agnostic drug. So I would say what I see for the future is more drugs like Vitragvi actually, with a specific genomic alteration. And Vitragvi, I mean, you have to be ultra or highly selective. Otherwise, you will probably not be as effective as you want or as safe as you would like. But I think this is coming, and there are several trials ongoing. I mean, in different across tumor types. Actually, this is one of the area I see in the future for Vitragvi specifically. Maybe assess Vitragvi in other tumor types outside of the indication, maybe in hematological malignancies, for example. But again, I think that the future is based on the genomic profiling of the patient, but there is something else actually in the future probably, and we'll see if it's true or not. It's probably the gene editing with the CRISPR technology. Maybe this will come in oncology, and we'll probably review some drugs or some technology like this in the future, I hope.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Fellis. I do as well. So thank you so much for that input. We look forward to the future and what you and your company will bring. So thank you so much. Dr. Spiegelman, if I can invite you back to the camera again for our final question. As scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? And what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Dr. Spiegelman, welcome back. Thank you.
I thank you very much. As I stated previously, Balversa is the first targeted therapy to be approved in the treatment of patients with metastatic bladder cancer. And I'm a true believer in precision medicine, as the previous panelist said, the true believer in very specific genetic makeups of various diseases. But if we're talking about the area that excites me the most at this point, it would have to be developing Balversa for localized treatment of bladder cancer, not systemically like it's given right now, but in various ways for locally using Balversa for bladder cancer. Also, I'd like to tell you the most exciting thing for me is using Balversa, not just in the locally advanced and metastatic urothelial cancer space, but to actually use it in all stages of bladder cancer. The prevalence of bladder cancer is increasing. The incidence of bladder cancer is increasing. We need to have better therapies. But what we're realizing now is if we could target these therapies for a specific patient, then we're doing our patients the greatest honor and we're taking them to another sphere of treatment. So I believe that not only genomic analysis is extremely important, but localized delivery of medication. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Spiegelman, and thank you for your very much patient-centric approach. And we're excited to see what innovation you and your company will bring in the future. So thank you so much for today. Dr. Brookman-Mai, welcome back to the camera. Again, final question for you. We'd love to get your input on, as scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? And what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Dr. Brookman-Mai, welcome back and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much again. So I think for the development of prostate cancer drugs, I would personally say it's challenging to predict what we will see exactly in 5 years from now, especially since there have been a lot of advances and a lot of knowledge gain, especially over the past few years on the disease in general. However, I would think there are a lot of tools that are very relevant to develop also drugs in the best possible way. For example, we have new diagnostic tools now. For example, next generation imaging such as PSMA PET. This will not only impact the disease classifications, it will also impact how we approach the disease classifications and the staging in the clinical setting, but maybe also provide a basis for drug development. In addition, we have seen a lot of advances for molecular testing, for genomic classification of tumors, and this will bring us also opportunities again in the clinical setting to risk stratify patients in a different way as we do it right now with the standard pathological assessments. And it will also provide us a best basis to develop drugs also in a more targeted and personalized way to bring it to a personalized medicine to patients. And what I'm personally excited about is also the development of machine learning and artificial intelligence tools for prostate cancer diagnosis, especially in the radiology assessment and in the pathology assessment. Also, this is something not only relevant for drug development, for clinical trial setting and implementation here, but also for the medical community in general to aid the clinical decision-making and the clinical diagnostic assessments. So finally, when I think again, what will we see in 5 years, I also think we need to look back again to the last 10 years, where we have seen the most advances for drug development in prostate cancer. And what we see from the available evidence and also based on our experience at Janssen with the development of Zytiga and then Erleada at a later stage for prostate cancer treatment, we have seen there has been a lot of improvement in the outcomes of for patients treated for prostate cancer. But what we have learned as well is that hormonal agents on their own have not cured prostate cancer. And I think simply with this message, we can clearly underline there is still a treatment option for patients, and we need more treatment options for prostate cancer patients. And finally, again, in 5 years from now, I would expect we look on drugs developed based on an innovative pipeline of targeted therapy, immunotherapy, biologics for treatment of patients with prostate cancer across the entire disease continuum, and possibly also with the goal to intercept the disease or even cure prostate cancer at earlier disease stages.
Great. Dr. Brookman-Mai, thank you so much. And we're very excited for the innovation you and your company will continue to bring to the world. So thank you for participating today.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnson, if I could welcome you back to the camera for one last question. Again, as scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? And what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Dr. Johnson, welcome back to the camera. Thank you.
Thank you. So Lorbrena it's a targeted therapy, and there's still some issues with targeted therapies. One is resistance to that targeted therapy. Also, patients experience brain metastases, and it's important to know that underlying mechanisms of the resistance, and also to understand the blood-brain barrier is very important. Most lung cancer patients and breast cancer patients are the ones that are most likely to experience brain metastatic disease. So in addition to that, usually there are multiple inhibitors, right, in these targeted therapy space. So which combinations to use that would give the best outcome, and also the order of treatment, I think, is a big consideration. So outside of this, I mean, what excites me in the next 5 years, gene therapies. We do a lot of CRISPR in the preclinical space in research. It has huge impact in that space, and I'd just like to see it grow and impact in the clinical space. There's also immuno-oncology. I think that started off a little hot. Maybe it's cooled a little bit, but I'm hoping that also ramps up, and specifically like bispecific antibodies. So those are some of the areas that I think will continue to grow in the next 5 years.
Great. Dr. Johnson, thank you very much. We are very excited to see the innovation you and your company will continue to bring, and very much appreciate your time today. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Ortiz, if I can welcome you back to the camera. Again, the final question: as scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? And what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Dr. Ortiz, welcome back to the camera.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. So yeah, at Bayer Oncology, we have learned a lot from the development of Nubeqa, but not just Nubeqa, also Xofigo, which is actually a former winner of this award, the Pre-Galien Award. And we've learned that it is possible to develop not only highly effective drugs, but also that have a high patient benefit in terms of favorable adverse event profiles. Also that, as the inhibition of the androgen receptor pathway today constitutes the mainstay of prostate cancer treatment. Many patients at one point in time will receive an androgen receptor inhibitor. It's really important to understand how to overcome resistance to the androgen receptor inhibition. And that is critical, of critical importance in prostate cancer. Furthermore, I think expanding the possibilities of activating the immune system against cancer, especially traditionally non-immunogenic cancers such as prostate cancer, will be an area of special interest.
Great. Dr. Ortiz, thank you so much. We are very excited for the innovation you and your company will continue to bring. And thank you so much for your time today and input. We appreciate it. And I would like to welcome back Dr. Seaman to the video. Final question for you as well. As scientists and clinicians, where do you see the next wave of innovations trending in your individual product area? What new areas of science in the fight against these conditions excite you the most? And what kind of innovations might the Galien Awards Committee be reviewing in your field 5 years from now? Dr. Seaman, welcome back to the camera. Thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity. I'm still very excited about RLT because it's pretty new to the field still. What excites me the most is the possibility on early diagnosis, hopefully with imaging, and consequently with the imaging on targeting directly, which I have pointed out previously, to the cancer cells. So really very targeted. And then to unlock really the potential today, not only of GEP-NET, but for other radiosensitive tumors. And as prostate has come up quite frequently, this is the next step we are looking into. But still, and Mimi brought this up on combination therapies, you know, to really look into the opportunities for rare cancer types as well, not for the big shots, which is always very nice, but really to dive into the rare diseases, which is very close to my heart. And the closest to my heart is the patients, I have to say, to really increase their quality of life and their still very poor conditions, you know. And I think this is really crucial. And we still have to dive into the details of production and drug supply, because this is somehow a little bit limiting still with playing with the isotopes and the radioactivity. But I think this is, I mean, we just built a new plant in the US, so I think it's going to be really positive and positive for hopefully all of the patients. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Seaman, thank you so much for your response and for your participation today. We're very excited for the continued innovation from yourself and from your company. So thank you so much. And to our audience at this time, we thank you again for participating in our poll at the beginning of our event today. If I could please ask the Galien Foundation team if we could post the results up on the screen for us. I'll give you a few moments to do so. Great. So our question again was, what is the most important single element of a future global policy agenda to advance health innovations that improve the human condition? 22% of our audience said universal access to medicine and vaccines. 19% of our audience stated investment in population-based primary care, prevention, and the social determinants of health. 4% of our audience stated empowerment of women, reproductive planning, and expanded education for young people. We had 15% of our audience that responded multilateral collaboration and health policy, including a return to US participation in the WHO and other global agencies. And 41% more stated more public trust in science. And that was our largest response. So again, thank you all that participated in our survey at the beginning. And thank you for answering our questions. And with that, I just want to thank again the company representatives for your time today and really spending this last hour with us, answering our questions, providing us with an update on the innovations coming from yourself and your companies. It was truly rewarding to spend this time with you. So I thank you. And specifically, really, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your service. And probably most of all, I thank you for your dedication to medicine and to healthcare. To our audience, we thank you so much for your time. We thank you for joining us today. As a note, this webcast is viewable on the Galien Foundation's homepage. So please go to our homepage to make sure you check that out. And finally, we would like to note Thursday's forum, the awards cocktail and presentation of the 2020 Vagelis Pro Bono Humanum Award winner, Dr. William Fagey. And with that, one last time, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our audience. We hope you have a great rest of the day, and we hope you will join us again on one of our other sessions taking place later today. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
best pharmaceutical product.